we'll move as a next to talk about IMEX Nature Research Report, as already Noah mentioned, the Regeneration Revolution, a new paradigm for event management. And this white paper was produced in partnership with the Global Destination Sustainability Movement and with a generous sponsorship by Marriott. And so the theme for IMEX this year, 2020 and 21, is nature. And the question comes up like, why nature? So, and here I would like to state a few words from Karina Bauer, who is the CEO of IMEX Group, which you probably all know. And I just wanted to quote her saying, our Regenerative Revolution report is a call to action and a powerful reminder that as human beings, we are nature. Planet Earth is our home, and it's the only one we have. And we believe the global meetings and events industry has an important part to play in making these changes. Our industry is full of people who care about people and who care deeply about making event and meetings experiences memorable, valuable, and innovative. The leading edge of change is available to all of us, and it can start with a few small tweaks in our behavior, our processes, and above all, our thinking. So, and with this, now we're moving into the presentation, which Guy will introduce us to more insight about this report in form of a PowerPoint, and which embraces, this report embraces the circular economy and also outlines a new event framework. And you will hear much more about that. And I would like to also mention that this report was authored by Guy, which you all know. And so we are very looking forward, Guy, to hear your presentation now. And so over to you, spot on, and yeah.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon for some of you. Really fantastic that you could join. I really appreciate that. Also know how busy we are with so much online content at the moment. So I'm going to use a different form of Zoom today. So you're going to see me around in the bottom, but I kind of get excited. So you might see me like jumping up over to here or jumping up somewhere else over here or in the middle. So yeah. So I'm going to share this little report with you, and it's really written, this report is written for event managers, okay? That was the brief, that's what we wanted to work with. Not all of you are event managers, some of you are, but you all work with event managers. But it's also our first piece of work. It's first piece of work in defining what regeneration is for the events industry in particular, but even more articulating what regenerative development means for the tourism industry and for destinations. So as I said, it's the first piece of work. And so the kind of question I'm going to throw out to all of you now and into the future is, what is this, how do we take regeneration fully in to the work we do as destination management professionals? And what does it really mean for how we run and manage and promote destinations? And that's a long conversation we're going to have over the next year or two or more. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Right, I don't need to tell you this, but our world has changed, isn't it? There's something that's kind of happened around the world at the moment that is causing a few kind of changes. And as you all know, there is a paradigm shift happening. Everything is being challenged, from the way we work, the kind of future of offices, how we travel, where we localize ourselves. Do we live in the city or do we live in the countryside? How we focus on what's important, how we imagine our lives, our industries, how we reframe our future. Interesting changes happening on how we connect with nature, how we connect with our communities. Many of us, certainly me, are not traveling every week like I used to. So I'm having a different kind of connection now with my local community that I never had before. So lots and lots happening really that really kind of changes everything. And as we kind of focused here with COVID and you know, flattening the curve and dealing with COVID, we all know that there are other waves behind it. And so the whole kind of point that we are making with this research is that our current way of thinking and working is not good enough to flatten the curve of the other waves that will come into the future, and that we have to become much more resilient at managing that and preparing for these shocks, as I like to call them. So this kind of means, if I move up here, this kind of means we have to move on, I think, from our focus the last few years, and many of you did an amazing work at being sustainable. But really, I think if we're honest, most of the work we've done at sustainability has been about doing less bad. We're recycling a bit more. We are using a bit better materials. We're using a bit more public transport. We're less emissions. But it's not good enough. And I think, sadly, you know, as there's no travel right now and our industry has been destroyed, we're actually seeing that, you know, to go to the next level, we need a lot more than just not traveling to lower emissions. So there's a whole type of thinking and a mindset change that needs to happen. And we think, and we're proposing, that this is a shift to a regenerative type of thinking, a type of thinking which is about recovery, about rejuvenation, and ultimately about healing the planet, the communities, and the economies that sustain us. And so, you know, I think the butterfly is such a great example of regeneration and transformation. You think of the little caterpillar that turns into the chrysalis, that sits dormant for a couple of months and then turns into a beautiful butterfly. It's an interesting thing about where we are at the moment. And there's an interesting thing is that when in research, they've kind of cut the chrysalis to let the butterfly out, and they thought in an easier way, they saw that the butterfly didn't grow to be so strong. The butterfly needs to fight, it needs to challenge, it needs to push out of the chrysalis and break out. And I think that's a bit like where we are now. We're in this phase of change, and it's our work to challenge everything and break out that will make us stronger and better for the future. And so these are really, really interesting times. And I think, you know, we can look outside our industry and we can look at the IT industry for some great examples of transformation and regeneration at the moment. Microsoft shifting with a commitment to be carbon negative first, but then to remove all carbon emissions by 2050, and then to invest a lot of money into innovation is one example. Walmart last week came out and they said they're going to be a regenerative company, zero emissions. They're going to restore seas and lands and transform food supplies. So the shift is on, and I think it's really for us now to think about what does this really mean for tourism and for events. And so that's some of this research and thinking that has happened here with this report that you can download on the IMEX website. And so really it's, you know, how do we use events to regenerate lives and communities? And how do we kind of shift to a zero carbon, circular and inclusive industry where everyone benefits from success? And we know that the situation today is not particularly beautiful. Our linear economy takes, it makes, it uses and disposes. And you only have to look at most events and how they build up and throw away to realize that. Only 8.6% of materials that are extracted from the earth are recycled back into the economy. 8.6%. That's what we call the circularity gap. Okay, that's pretty tough when you think 100 billion metric tons of materials extracted. We know that we throw away 30% of food, and that food alone is 6% of global emissions. That's more than double the emissions from flying. You know, plastic is around a similar amount of emissions from the plastic we throw away as well. And so yet we hammer flying, but we don't always hammer the other aspects of emissions that we're creating. So we need a radical rethink of many areas of how we live and work. And so you know, this kind of makes us think a little bit about the circular economy. And this is really where we started with this report. We started on a report about the circular economy and how do we create a circle that makes, use, recycles products, retakes them, remakes them, reuses them, recycles them, then remakes them. And so, and then this is, as many of you are working on this is a big trend. Circularity is important. It's a $1 trillion market, and it's only going to grow more and more important. And there's amazing commitments to do that. But I think that circularity in its current concept is limited and doesn't include people enough. And so we have to go to the next step, which is really about people and nature. And so this is really what a lot of our thinking is about here. In the circularity world, they normally talk about two things, the biosphere and the technosphere. And this is about how we operate the economy. So easy one is the biosphere. We grow stuff to make products of, you know, we grow trees to make paper or wood to build our stage sets. So in a circular economy, we have to take that wood, we grow it correctly, we then collect it, we compost it, we use it to regenerate soils, or we burn it to make energy. It's quite a simple understanding, and we have to get very efficient at doing that. In the technosphere, it's about all of those stuff we make. So we extract metals to make IT equipment. In a circular economy, we have to get much better at reusing that, repairing it, remaking it, recycling it indefinitely. Okay, so it's often a lot about separating the natural components to the man-made components to allow that to happen. But in a circular world, we don't often include the humans, the people. And I think they're a key component. So I've used some work from a guy called Alex Lemille, who calls that the human sphere. And in that, we are energy and resource. We bring in energy, we bring in resources. And our key role is to preserve and regenerate the biosphere. And we have to have a key role in maintaining the value of the technosphere. And we have to do that in a way that integrates people and includes people so that everyone benefits. But for us to do that, for us to make the circular economy work, we have to revalue our relationship with nature. And nature is an amazing teacher. I mean, just look at this from Gaudi, who looked at a plant, beautiful plant there, his name is totally, I've forgotten now, and he came up with his staircases. So nature can teach us. Nature's been evolving and learning for a long time. She is this amazing library of knowledge. I invite all of you to type into your browser asknature.com, and you'll see a database of tens of thousands of innovative ideas from nature that are being used in business today. Asknature.com. But nature adapts and she evolves. You know, sometimes we get stuck, don't we? Like with COVID now, we get stuck and we don't know what to do. We're, you know, our emotions block us, which is totally understandable. But, you know, maybe we can learn from nature about adapting and moving on, like this tree does to Angkor Wat. It kind of gets on and just gets on with living. So can we learn from that kind of a process of adapting and not resisting? Nature lives on balance. This tree and the mushrooms have a symbiotic relationship. So how can we do that more with the communities around us? How can we realize that nature is not to be conquered or opposed, but to be used in how we make our design decisions? And in this image, which is so powerful to me, is like, I feel like a lot of the tourism and the events industry is a burnt down forest at the moment. We burnt to the ground, our trees are in cinders. But like any forest after a fire, it's the fire that creates the innovation that sparks up regrowth and regeneration. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity for us to regrow and to become even more resilient and stronger and better. But all of that requires a shift of thinking from linear systems and extractive mindset to a living system mindset. And this is really where we focus on quality and effectiveness versus efficiency and growth and numbers. It's about resilience versus competitiveness. It's about inclusivity instead of, a focus on yourself. It's about abundance, harmony, wellness. And I think a lot of these elements are things we think about in events, and we can get better about it. I also think it's interesting in that nature, there's no greed, no unemployment, no waste, no inequality, no poverty. It's been designed out by nature. So how can we do that to society and to the events we organize? So there's many things we can learn from nature. Here is the Shinkansen train. When they designed it, it was a high-speed train in Japan. It had a flat nose, and when it got to 300 kilometers an hour, it made a boom and horrible vibrations. It was not good design. So the designers one day saw a kingfisher when he was fishing, and he went, "Oh, look at that nose. I wonder if that could work." He brought back in, he redesigned the train using the kind of nose style of a kingfisher, and voila, they got rid of the problem of the vibrations and the boom as it went fast. So nature can teach us a lot of things. So when we start to put this forward now, we've started to work on a design basis and principles. So this is our first draft. We've called it Hanawa. Hanawa is an ancient San word, which is about living in harmony with your environment. And we've taken the kind of concepts of circular economy first and then tweaked it. So Ellen MacArthur came up with some good principles. So we've taken that and really kind of then started to rethink a bit more the next step. So when we design events, it's about designing out waste and pollution. So pollution is waste, right? It can be plastic in the ocean, or it can be plastic that goes to a landfill, or it can be carbon emissions, or it can be the emissions, the contaminants that go in the air when we have massive conventions like the World Mobile Conference in London, in Barcelona. So we can start at the early stage to design out waste and pollution by thinking and acting early. We can start to design our events to keep products and materials in use for longer. We can start to design our events to be more inclusive and more diverse. Diversity of opinion, diversity of thought, race, sex, etc. Economic status. And lastly, we can design our events to regenerate natural systems. We are nature, so that also means regenerating communities and people, and not just the forests, but all of that needs to be considered. So, this is Hanawa, this is the framework. You can download this. I'm going to take you through quickly some of the key parts of that. So number one, we're saying that you have to redefine your strategy. You have to think about, are we travel agents or change agents? So when the first moment of designing an event, let's switch from linear to living systems thinking. Let's think about how everything is connected in our event, all of our stakeholders, all of our partners, all of our sponsors. Then let's think about how can we use the event to address elements of the Sustainable Development Goals and what our way is to bring about the change. And from a first moment, you can do that. And we've seen many events that do that well today. So there's lots of great examples. But again, it has to happen from the first moment. So about bringing that type of thinking into your strategy. This is an amazingly complex side, but it's also quite simple in some ways. It's a piece of work done by DGTL, which is a music festival. And they looked at all of the components and all the resources that go into an event on the left-hand side here. All the water, the waste, the money, the materials. And then looked at all what comes out on the other side. And then how much they reuse, how much they throw away, and how much they recycle. And how much pollution and contaminants. And so from this, it allowed them to really map out how well the event was working and where they had issues and where they have challenges. So it's a great way of really working out what we need to do. So that focus on measurement is critical, and we need to get even better at that. So that's a good thing with a lot of work you guys are doing with the benchmarking and the GDS index is about measuring and understanding where you're at. So it's about rethinking your value chain, and you guys I think are particularly good, but not all event organizers are good at really working as a team. IMEX is a great example of working as a team. This is the green team in IMEX US, and it really kind of, for me, it communicates the power of the contractor and the venue and the supplier and the AV supplier working together as superheroes on this task of regeneration. And that's created amazing results. Over a series of years now, IMEX is at 80% waste diversion in Frankfurt, 94% in Las Vegas. And that's only through that teamwork and the culture that they create through rethinking their value chain and involving everyone. Ooh, excuse me. Brand experiences. We all produce brand experiences, but we have to get better at those. There's some great companies out there now that really collecting waste and repurposing it. This is a company I love called EcoBooth in London, who are taking, in this case, plastic waste from the Thames, from Canary Wharf, and they use that to make new things out of it. They've taken the insides of fridges, they've taken leftover light shades, road cones, all different types of things that are thrown away, and they create stage sets and brand experiences. And that's really about rethinking how we design out waste, how we then design it to be reused multiple times, and how that benefits society and people around us. Food is a key one. Many of you are working on food, but I think it's one of the most powerful ways to regenerate people and nature. And so DGTL, this music festival, did a great job at creating a circular food court. So they took all of their food service, and then first of all they reduced and then eliminated meat, because they said that wasn't in line with their principles. They needed to be radical and reduce emissions. So they started with that, and then they worked with food suppliers and caterers who really understood it, and so they started buying organic products and producing an amazingly healthy, sustainable menu. Then they got the visitors really involved in composting the food and the plates and cups that were being used as food service. Then they turned that into a good compost that they then gave back to the urban farmers. Then the urban farmers then planted the vegetables that then they resold back to the food caterers. So they created a perfect circle. And that's the great thing with events. We can create these perfect worlds that we then can look to see how we scale those to a city level. So this is a great example. I really invite you to click on and look at their work, because it's kind of the type of thing we can do on lots of things. I think what's happening now with COVID is really making us rethink mobility. Here we are online. The future will be much more hybrid. People, I think, will travel less. So our job is to get them to travel better. And when they travel, to stay longer in our destinations. And once they're in the destinations, we want them to walk, we want them to bike, we want them to train. And ultimately after that, we want them to kind of offset those emissions that they've just invested in visiting us in a project, ideally locally, that helps us regenerate nature in its communities. So I think, we need to return back to our focus on offsetting, but with a different lens, a regenerative lens of how that really boosts communities, economies, and the planet. And this is, I think, beyond zero, just as Microsoft did with their emissions. How do we not offset 10% of events emissions, or even 100%, but could we offset 200% of events emissions? Price points are dropping very fast on those type of projects, and we can do a lot more. This example is from Croke Park, and it's really about how Croke Park thinks about how they run their stadium in Dublin. 75% of their employees are from the local neighbourhood, I think from within 3 or 4 kilometres. They work really closely with local schools, with the NGOs, but really super closely on the community. And what's happened is that they've regenerated the community. It used to be a rough, poor area of Dublin, a bit dangerous to be honest to some degrees. And now the whole community is really regenerating and becoming a better place to live. And so that's an interesting way how they can attribute that to their legacy and really get involved in those type of type of things. So how do we take that more into the work we do, and how we really involve all types of communities in the work we're doing when we manage destinations? And lastly, reporting your impact. Many of you are reporting impact. You're using your GDS index to do that. In the events, there's still not enough people doing that. Some people think reporting is just about credibility and marketing. Yes, that's a tick, but it's also about management. So with Oracle here, you know, they've used their reporting over the last 10 years to really track how much their waste went up and then their waste went down, and how they've got much better at donating, composting, recycling, landfill, and rethinking, which is a kind of color that's not really there, but is the white space. So they've designed out waste. So those are kind of nice close to that cycle. And so reporting is key. And that's something that we, as destinations and the work we do, can be really helping people on that journey. So that's kind of an end, a really fast track approach to this report. I think what, you know, as I said, our industry is in kind of this moments of the forest after the fire. And we are sprouting, we're already sprouting new growth, and the fire is still burning. So really, as we looked ahead, what's our role in building back a regenerative future? What do we do to regenerate our communities, or our economies, our clients? Because that's a super exciting challenge. And there's this great phrase at the moment that comes out from the climate world, which is, only the impossible is interesting. Only the impossible is interesting. I think many of you may be looking at your world and thinking it's pretty impossible at the moment, and that's super interesting. So how do we move forward? How can we take a framework like this and nature's thinking and think about what that can do for our destination? And kind of to finish here is regenerative development asked us to imagine our destinations, our events, our communities as even more beautiful, even better, even more vibrant, even more productive, even more successful, more happiness, more laughter, more dancing, more love. And that's the kind of focus I think is really powerful. So as we look at this beautiful landscape of Yosemite and El Capitan, and it kind of feels ironic here because I'm sitting here kind of climbing El Capitan, which I did 10 years ago to this day almost. And when I climbed El Capitan, it made me really think about the nature of the wonder of nature and what I do, and what a glorious possibility that we have to work on this stuff. So that's the report. Please download it. Please comment. It's going to go. It's going to carry on. It's going to get more focused on destinations and other aspects. So love to have your comments and contribution. And I'm sorry, Claudia, I talked too much. I got too excited today.
Thank you very much, Guy. Thank you very much. And as we move now into a little bit a discussion with you today, and I know it has been a lot of information probably. So, but we'll have time, and we would really ask you to jump in and then really just unmute yourself or raise your hand. We will be looking out to hands out there. But a question, I would like to start with a question to you, Guy. If you say, how do you accelerate, or how can you accelerate regeneration from the way of thinking we are or have right now? What would be your advice where to start? Because it looks like, first of all, I mean, no, we have been working in sustainability for a long time, and now with this new framework approach. So the question is here really like, okay, wow. So where do I get my foot into the door to begin with? And you, of course, you outlined the steps, and first of all, we're redesigning your strategy and so on. But like, you know, it's still quite overwhelming.
Yeah,
I would say for many. So that's.
I agree, and I think it also depends. I mean, if you're in some of the destinations and in Aarhus, some places like that are very advanced in sustainability, and some of the other destinations here are even just starting on the sustainability journey. So then to introduce another thing is even more scary and perhaps even more confusing. And I think there's a way to do it with both. I think right now, due to the effect of COVID, it's the time of getting people together to rethink and reimagine together. So the kind of work that we've done with Laura in Geneva or in Lausanne or in Dublin at the moment is to really starting to get together, to rethink together and think that how do we heal our communities is critical. It's critical. So that stakeholder engagement and collaborative design, I think for destinations is a key focus. Yeah. And then it's the storytelling of showing how people are already regenerating their destinations. Whether you're a Croke Park or many of you have other businesses that are rethinking catering or rethinking stand design or rethinking transport, they're already having that shift to regeneration. So how do we unlock those stories and then use those people and those stories to inspire others? Because most of this is not so much new stuff, it's just changing our mindset. And then there's, in every destination, there's some brilliant people in biomimicry. Is how do we biomimicry is that study of nature to accelerate innovation. So how do you bring them into these meetings to share what they're doing and what they're learning and use that to catalyze more energy and thoughts?
So basically, from what you're saying, when we bring the stakeholders together, so also to think about even more diversifying an invitation of other groups that we typically would not have in our stakeholder engagement outreach.
Yeah,
so
exactly. And that's what we learn from nature, right?
Saying, to invite these designers or biologists or so many other branches and themes that could come into all of this discussion with their own ways of seeing things differently.
Yeah.
Okay, and then also the other thing is what I think would also stand out and is so important, has been and is and will be, is the measuring part. I mean, this part is so key. And maybe you could outline here a little bit from terms of measuring. How will that change? Will we need to measure new things, or how does this fit together in the whole concept?
So I think there's an interesting, if you think back a few years, we were just measuring economic impacts of either events or activities in a destination. Then some of us have started to move to measure more environmental aspects. Still not many of us know the carbon footprint of tourism or events in our destination. But some of the event organizers know the footprint of their event and how much waste it produces. And that's what we've been really trying to push with the index, is getting people to measure more, first of all, environmentally. But now we have to think much more about socially as well. And how do we measure social change? How do we really measure knowledge development and what we do as an industry? How do we really measure regeneration? How do we put the numbers on that? So there's a big evolution at the moment, I think, to tell better stories based on data, and then use that data for decision making.
I think when listening to you, I think the attitude, measuring attitude, which is not concrete numbers, this will be a very, very important part.
Yeah,
I mean, sentiment and that part, because this is actually. And when we talk about regenerations, it's not only numbers, right? I mean, if we talk about, let's put it, if you just mentioned happiness before, how do you measure happiness?
Yeah.
It's not about numbers. So that's why, as we go along this journey, this will be very interesting to measure, of course, in addition to which is very important, of course, the environmental impact, but also the social legacy, but also beyond that, I think when we take into account the human
Definitely. I mean, I think one thing that many of us were really bad at over the last few years is really measuring the resident satisfaction. In tourism, a little bit, but in the events world, we say our communities are delighted to have events, right? But is that the case in the future with COVID? Our communities, we're seeing now from research that many communities are worried about having tourists and business visitors attending their cities. So we need to get better at measuring what residents think, how they feel, and influencing that to a certain degree. So there's many things that we need to step up with and integrate. There's lots of the stuff's dispersed and we don't really bring it together.
And you also introduced us to the framework HANUA. So in this case, here the question is like, how could destinations integrate this approach, or into their work, into their plans, and so on? So that, because it is very comprehensive, and so that is a question.
Yeah, I think there's two sides of that. So if you organize events as a destination, many of you organize your own events. You have a team that organizes lots of different events, and they could be everything from a fam trip through to a conference, through to maybe a sport or culture event that you might do. So then you can take the whole framework and start to think about how you tweak your management system to go to that. Some of you are working with an ISO management system. I know, and I see you nodding there. Berlin, you've taken approaches from ISO and in your own approach to organizing events. So this is just a gentle nudge to go to the next level and really think about regeneration rather than doing less bad with your event organization. So that's the first step. You can integrate it. The second thing is around education and inspiring your members, your clients, your community of agencies and venues to think and to look at this. What can they do to regenerate? What can they do to think more about nature and use nature to inspire innovation? So share the framework, organize, invite speakers who focus on biomimicry into sessions, give them a challenge, run a workshop. What can you do to kind of come up with some practical examples? And we don't have hundreds of those yet. That's our next phase. We've got a few examples. But, nature, as you mentioned already, really focused on diversity. So let's bring that conversation, the diverse conversation together and push that as an educational and storytelling opportunity.
And looking into destinations as well, like not so much from meetings and events perspective, but like in general, or whatever comes to you. So what would you say, which destinations or destination can be urban, can be regional? What would you say is a great example of regenerative, if there is such thing, destination that we could look at, and maybe, because again, it's always good to look to others or outside examples than the outside sector. So if there are any destinations who would be, what would you
I'm looking in the audience here. Who's from Flanders? Anyone from Flanders here? Yeah, well, of course, there's Rebecca. I didn't see you there. So I think the work that Visit Flanders has done was really pioneering. They started to really think and worked closely with a friend of mine, Anna Pollock, to really think about, what the future of travel is there. So I would invite you to speak to Rebecca and the team there and have a look at some of the great work they've done there. I would invite you to look at New Zealand and some of the amazing work that's been done in New Zealand at the moment. I don't think there's too many fantastic examples of whole countries or cities doing the work. And so that's what we're focusing on at the Index, and the work we're doing now to start this journey with the projects in Dublin, with Geneva, Lausanne, Goyang. We just done a session today working on regeneration. Hopefully soon with Hilda, we're going to start some more work there in Iceland. So this is the kind of thinking. We're at the front edge now. So yeah, let's get into that. But let's also look outside the industry. Look at regenerative agriculture. I think there's some really good examples there. So I'm thinking maybe Rebecca can add something to that. But that's what I would suggest.
Thank you very much. And so I would like from the audience, we would love to hear from you if like what questions or insights or remarks that you would have, we would love to hear from you. So give yourself a little push, open your microphone, and we are happy to hear from you.
And while someone thinks of a question, I can just see Anna sitting there up in the Faroe Islands, nicely wrapped up. Must be chilly up in the north. And I think some of the work I think that you did up in there to close the islands. The islands were closed for cleaning, which was a fantastic concept of how we regenerate our home. It turned out to be an amazing piece of marketing. But it's and there's a kind of a small action that is very regenerative and was great. So I'm not sure, Anna, if you got anything to share from that experience that could enlighten us.
Yeah, actually, that's something that we will do every year. That we will close our islands for, or not. It's not like we close our islands, but we close the main tourist sites for cleaning or for redoing paths or remaking stairs or something like that. So we invite 100 people from abroad to come and work with us for the weekend, and they pay for their own travel, and then we pay for their accommodation and the food and all the cleanup, actually. Yeah, and it's a really good experience. And when we opened the registration this year, it closed our system. It just broke down. So yeah, but of course this year we couldn't do it because of COVID. So and we are not sure if we can do it next year either. But we have thought maybe we will just gather Faroese people to do that for a weekend. Why not? Because that would be a very community building, and yeah, great for the destination.
Brilliant. And I think that's that. I think, next year, the winter next year, I've got Tatiana from Ljubljana, and I think just the kind of regenerative aspect of what the city did in Ljubljana to close the center of town, to make it pedestrian, was a radical thing, which has really regenerated the center of the town there and the community and life and well-being. So there's a different aspect, a different way of thinking of regeneration too.
Yeah, so if no one from the audience has a question, I do have one, because I think there was something that was a little bit, I mean, it was actually mentioned in the talk that you had during IMEX, and I think it's a very good question to bring in here, which is why now? Now that, because at the beginning, you asked the question, Claudia, about bringing the stakeholders together. A lot of the stakeholders, what I hear from you guys essentially is they're in tatters, they're really struggling, they don't really have time to think about this right now. Why should they?
There's two parts of that. I think is, firstly, the clock is against us, isn't it? The scientists tell us we have 10 years left to make changes to slow down or to avert a climate disaster and an ecological disaster with biodiversity collapse. So there's the click on that. The second thing is, when things are burnt down, it's the time to redesign your house, isn't it? Your house is burnt down, so let's redesign the house. And I want it with 2 nice windows and a nice door, and it's facing the sun, and there's nice solar panels, and I can really design the beautiful, perfect house. We have that moment now, I think. And it's tough. It's really tough. And for us to engage our supply chains and the agencies who are in pain. We've all got friends who are out of work. Some of us maybe had to cut down our hours. This is a painful time. So we have to be brave and bold and work together to imagine the new future. And there's lots of examples of this. There was a fantastic meeting in 1944 that brought together most of the leaders of the world to imagine and design the UN to create the future of Europe. And they did that when the war was raging. In 1943, they designed the NHS, the National Health System of the UK, as war was raging. So these were brave people that started to bring together people to create the blueprint for a better world. And I think that's our opportunity. We have to be brave and bold to do that.
And I would like to add to that, with all of this, let's put it this way, head thinking, what is the right, so what you just said, but I just want to bring in here the human aspect as well again, that it is simply, if we took the time to ground ourselves, we would know which way we would probably go. And there is only one way to go. And I think to bring in this equation into all of the logical thinking, I think this is also now the time. So not only our economies or outside, but also with us. So that's just an addition that I would like to give to that, that this is simply the right thing to do if we ask ourselves, those who have children or families or looking outside to the world and to the people, if we are talking about humanity. So then simply this is, I think, personally and non-negotiable. So I just would like to add to that.
Is there anyone working on any regenerative projects that they'd like to share? Is anyone doing anything that I think is a bit interesting, a bit different?
Hildur, you were, Guy was mentioning that you are planning to do something. So maybe you just want to share something, a little idea.
Well, we're just using the time now to refocus our own strategy. So yeah, so we are looking into a project with Guy and Genevieve from Meat for Impact. So I think so I don't really have anything specific to share. I wanted to ask you, Guy, because in the beginning you said that this was a report written for event managers, and I'm just wondering, this whole concept, and I'm just looking at the framework, the Hanua framework. It's for event managers that are for example DMCs or PCOs, just small agencies here in Iceland or in the Faroe or in any destination, and they have, they have this vision, and they have the strategy, and they want to, work on sustainability, but I'm just thinking like how to do it and what to focus on first. Of course, there's, this framework, and you have one, these steps, and you finalize with reporting your impact, but how to measure, how to measure this impact, and what are the tools, what are the, resources. Maybe that's another report, I don't know, but yeah, I think that's a challenge for small companies that want to do their part. But then, of course, they have a client, and maybe the client is not focused on this. So,
yeah, I think often the hardest part is just starting. I think so. I see so many. I was responsible for 2,500 event planners when I was at MCI, trying to get them to do this. And the hardest thing was always just to get them to start. Once they started, it all kind of seemed to happen. So start small, trying to get, things focused on something, and I think it's, that's our job to educate. How do you start? How do you measure the materials that have been used in the stage set and what that means? How do you measure some practical things? How many times do you reuse your stage set? How do you measure on your budget if something sustainable cost you more or saved you? What's that extra line in the Excel? So there's a series of small micro steps that everyone has to start with, and I always say it's about progress and not perfection. So you don't have to be perfect. It's not black or white. It's not 100% organic food today or zero yesterday. It's about little steps. And so that's really where I focus on when we work with planners, to get them just into action. And it's, I think there's a massive shift. I mean, the numbers told us, I didn't present the research, but the survey data showed there was this massive switch of awareness in 2019 with event planners. And it's carrying on. The understanding that this is important has actually increased through COVID. We've carried on and done 3 research points. So I don't think we have to convince people anymore. Our job is just to make it easier.
And I would like to add to this, if you're saying, Hildur, you were asking about tools or so. So within the framework, you still, of course, have the like standards, like, you know, sustainable event standards or the ISO. So basically to marry them, to integrate them. And so this is always, because they will not go away, and they are key and important standards and tools out there. So it's not reinventing the wheel from scratch. It's rather than taking what is already and marrying that together and integrating on your steps as you walk along. Right? And so I'm looking at the watch, and the discussion is really super interesting, and it would be so great to talk more and break out into groups now, if we were now visually in a conference. And so we are coming to the close, and I would like to give over to Noah, who will give some steps for what's coming up. And yeah, over to you, Noah.
Yeah, so I'll keep this nice and sweet and short. The first announcement for next step I want to mention is the next meeting. It'll take place on the 9th of December. I'll send out an email about that, and it'll be about taxing tourism report, organized by our dear friends now, and I think in part in collaboration with ECM, and just looking at how does funding at the moment work for DMOs, how will it change in the coming years. So first notice. Second announcement is for the benchmarking itself. Yeah, big well done to everyone that's completed. The turnout was fantastic. Should have maybe started the session with that. But the next steps are now, of course, from us to get back to you. And there's 2 key dates, which I'll mention here now, and again, send out in an email, which are: first, we'll have an initial review, and you'll receive an email by the 14th of November with requests for more details. And then the assessment reports themselves for everyone on standard and above will be due by the 8th of December. Yeah, so keep those dates in mind. We'll do our best to get everything done by that, and we'll arrange dates and calls and such with you as the time comes. So thank you all so much.
And high five and a big thank you. This is the best return on benchmarking we've ever had. I think we had 95% of you actually complied with the due date, which is we never had that all the years we've done it. So thank you very much. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, everyone. It's 11:02, 2 minutes over. Hope that is fine, okay, for you. And I'm wishing you a wonderful rest of the week, working week. And again, thank you so much for being with us. And we look forward to the conversation with you. Thank you very much.